I'm Jim Leach, and I am your host for this session of Blue Steel Police Training, brought to you by Tennessee Underground on your YouTube TV channel. Glad to have you with us this morning. Let's talk for a few minutes about note taking, which is a form of documentation. Why is documentation important in the police business? It backs you up. It gives you credibility. It gives credibility to what you're saying, gives validity. And you may say, look, man, we got tapes. We got all kind of tapes to show everything we did. We don't need to take notes. Why should I take notes? I got tapes. Notes can serve as a backup to the tape. I have found this out in 40 plus years of being around this business. Technology is wonderful. It's a great asset till it messes up. And it seems to me like that it always messes up at the worst possible time. Okay? Take notes as a backup to your equipment. And another thing, depending on your situation, your department, you may not always have a tape available to you. So you need to be good at note taking. Good note taking is terribly important, I think. Another thing is, a tape doesn't always give an accurate representation of the situation. Okay? Videotapes are two-dimensional. Things don't happen in two-dimensional things. Audio tapes are even less. I know when I used to wear a tape undercover, it was audio. And we seldom had them, to be honest with you, back in my day, but sometimes we did. But I would listen to that tape, and it didn't nearly describe what was actually happening. A friend of mine was taking a murder contract one time. I was running surveillance. And in my car, we couldn't see what was going on. We heard him go up to the target. We heard him start talking. And then all of a sudden he said, "Oh, shit," and went to cussing. And then we heard him say, "You're killing me, man." Well, my partner and I were starting to come in like the cavalry. But my boss could see what was going on. He stopped us. He said, "No, everything's cool, everything's cool." Turned out, our man, it was a two-door car. And our man, at the instruction of the target, which is not a good idea, but he was getting in the back seat of the target's car. And he was my buddy was a great big guy. And it was hard for him to squeeze in. Sounded like he was getting killed. Nothing was wrong. How many times have you seen on television a situation where one of your partners gets into a violent situation, and you see a citizen that's taking a video on their camera, and we see it and say, "Oh me, that didn't look good. Why did that happen? I wish she hadn't got in that fight." Then you see the body cam or the dash cam, and it shows the whole situation from a different angle. You say, "Well, wait a minute, that's not the way it looked the first time." And then you see the 15 or 20 seconds before the fight broke out, and you say, "Now I understand." Notes can help bring everything into perspective. Let's say your partner got in a car chase. Guy jumped out of his car, ran across the field. 30 minutes later, you see this guy walking down the street. You stop him to interview him. Your cameras are not picking up his entire body. You look down, and he's got mud all over his shoes. You said, "That's what we call a clue. Looks like somebody ran through a field." You enter that in your notes and explains why you took the actions you did. But your video wouldn't always get it. Another thing, when you're interviewing somebody, a lot of times you want to back up and check what they said or refresh your memory. Have you ever tried backing up a tape in the middle of an interview? Now, if you want to put a little drama in it, you might do that. And interviewing, sometimes a little play acting involved. You might say, "Well, I'll tell you what, let's run this tape back and see exactly what you said." But it's easier to look back in your notes and say, "Well, look, I wrote down this and this and this. Did I write it down right? Is that what you said?" It also gives you a perfect opportunity to have them repeat what they said and see if they repeat it like they told it to you the first time. If they can't, they might be trying to pull your string just a little bit and lie to you. Okay? It's a good opportunity. Another thing, one other thing, this can be big, especially if you're talking to people who don't deal with the police a lot. Note taking is a little less formal feeling than taping. Sometimes you might start trying to take an interview with somebody and you say, "Let me turn this tape on here." And let me say this, unless you're working undercover, don't try to secretly turn that tape on, because if they catch you, attorney friend of mine caught an officer taping his client one time. He just kind of slid his hand up on there and he said, "What did you just do?" He said, "Well, I turned on the tape." He said, "You didn't tell us you were going to tape it. We're out of here." You get caught secretly taping somebody, and it throws your credibility out the window. So if you're going to tape it, let them know you're taping them, okay? Unless you're undercover. But taking notes is not quite as formal. It doesn't scare people as bad. Sometimes turning on those tapes will scare people off just a little bit, okay? A few tips about good note taking. I like when I'm interviewing somebody to try and start off on an even keel with a good level conversation going on, not argumentative or whatever, if they'll let me, if I can. So if I'm going to start taking notes when I start interviewing, I'm going to take notes from the start. Okay, I'm going to say, do you mind, Mr. Leach? Do you mind if I take some notes on this? Because you can look at me and tell, I'm a little long in the tooth here. I don't remember like I used to. Let me take some notes here. A little simple-minded on top of that. You don't mind. Start taking notes. Start at the beginning. Do not start just writing when they say something that sounds important. Okay? You don't really want them to know what you think is important, especially if you're talking to an informant, we'll say, or a hesitant witness or victim, and certainly not a suspect. Because a lot of the times they're going to get back out on the street and tell what you say. If you're talking to an informant, they may tell whoever you're trying to get information on exactly what you're interested in. I talked to a guy one time. I was working. This guy had choked 2 people to death, and we ended up getting him the life sentence on both the murders. I was preparing to interview him, and I found out he had run around with a guy, had committed an armed robbery with a guy, in fact, that worked sort of part-time with as a snitch. I asked the captain worked the guy. I said, can you fix it up for me to talk to him? He said, sure. So I sat down. I talked to the guy for about an hour and a half. Right in the middle of when I was talking to him, I asked him about the information that I was actually interested in, because I didn't want him to go back and tell the guy, look, I talked to that Leach guy, and he's looking hard at you about this killing over here. I didn't want him to know what I was interested in. So start taking notes at the beginning, and don't just write when they say something interesting. As a matter of fact, fake it, man. Write some stuff down that you don't really care about, just to fool them a little bit. And very, very important, and this works with hesitant witnesses, hesitant victims, but especially with a suspect. If they start saying important things, especially with a suspect, if they start saying incriminating things, do not interrupt. That means you don't start writing, you don't ask questions, you let them tell it. Because we talked about documentation backing you up on the witness stand, giving you credibility. But if worse comes to worse, I can testify as to what you told me, okay? And maybe I don't have notes, maybe I don't have a tape, but I can still get on the witness stand as a law enforcement officer in the United States of America and raise my right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God, and tell what you told me. So let them tell it first. At least then you've got that. If you make notes after the interview, let's say they get nervous when you start trying to take notes. So as soon as you take those notes after the interview, as soon as possible. It's what we call contemporaneous notes, are made at the very same time that the conversation is being had. But if you can't do that because the person doesn't want you to, they're getting hinky, what you want to do is talk to you, right? So you got to make notes after the interview. Do it as soon as possible after the interview, and make note what time you did it and all that, because the theory being the closer you did it to when it was said, the more accurate your notes will be. Keep in mind, if you make notes outside of the interview or outside of the recording, whatever the situation is, make sure that prosecutors and supervisors are aware of those notes and what was said. We see a lot of cases now in the news where they say they got thrown out because that we did wrong in taking confessions or taking statements or DNA or whatever. Also, you see them quite often that get turned over because discovery wasn't done properly. You make sure it's not your fault. If you got notes that say something, you make sure that prosecutor is aware of what those notes say, in case they do need to be discoverable by the defense. Okay? Make sure don't let it be your fault. And also, in this session and any other training sessions we do that you watch for us, don't let anything that I say or anybody on this channel says make you be in opposition to your departmental regulations or your departmental policy or what your prosecutor says they want you to do to prepare for a case. Be sure and get along with them, because that's what you got to do. Folks, we hope these little tips will be helpful for you. That's our objective. We want to help you be better police officers, make better cases. Until next time, I'm Jim Leach. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Please be safe.